Hello and welcome. My name is Kaylee Jo and I make content all about my experiences as a theater educator, and one of my favorite parts of my job is having the opportunity to direct the various shows that my students put together. I recently made a video where I talked about the casting process and how to make that a little easier, specifically in an educational theater setting, and within that video I talked about the importance of having strong audition paperwork. Today I am going to share my audition paperwork with you. There is actually a link in the description box down below that you can click on. This is a Google Doc, so as long as you have a Google account, it should just make a copy for you so that you own your own version of this paperwork. I am going to switch over to my computer screen so that I can walk through the paperwork with you. A lot of it is self-explanatory, but at the same time, I want to kind of justify or explain my reasoning behind some of what's on the paperwork, because this paperwork looks so different than it did for the very first show that I ever directed, because over my years of directing, I have learned what I need to keep in the paperwork, what I need to leave off, and I just want to have the opportunity to explain my perspective to you. So I hope that this is helpful to you, and let's jump over to my screen. All right, so here we are on the audition paperwork. As a friendly reminder, this was created with the intention to physically print off this paperwork and fill it out by hand. This is a choice that I've made just because it alleviates any concerns that can happen with technological issues, Wi-Fi issues, and so on. So that is why I do it that way. This paperwork is only 5 pages long. I try to keep everything as short and concise as possible because I think that means it's more likely that people will actually read all of the information and absorb it. I have redacted any information regarding me, my school, or the most recent show that we have done, but this means that you can just go in and edit this and change all of this information to what is relevant for you. So on this very first page, I just put all of the most important information up top, which is usually going to be dates and deadlines as it relates to the show. I also have this bright yellow highlighted section that reminds them the day and time that all of this paperwork is due on. Moving down, I just want to tell them about the show, especially if it's a show that they might not necessarily be familiar with. And this paperwork is geared a little more towards play auditions. Musical paperwork can be a little more extensive just because rather than just acting, obviously it's also singing and dancing. So there's just more layers to it and it can be a little longer and more complicated. So this paperwork is more so meant for plays. So I will put in the logo of the show here on the left, and then I will copy and paste the plot summary, usually from the publisher's website, and plop that in here. If there's anything within the show that I'm concerned about that could be sensitive to some people, then I will put the rating or just some kind of warning, whatever is relevant there for that particular title. Moving down, we are still on page 1, but this is the section where I talk about the characters in the show, so the roles that students are auditioning for. I will write out the character name, the size of their role, and I will explain that here on page 3, I believe. And then what gender that role needs to be cast as. Sometimes it's very specific, and other times we have more flexibility. So I put all of that information on the front page, as well as a brief description of that character. I also include any specific, more unique traits about the different characters, just so students can be aware of that without having to read the entire script. So for example, on this character, I put, this performer should have excellent comedic timing. Down here, I put this character has a Scottish accent. Like, these are things that students should be aware of as they kind of dig into the show and decide what characters they want to be considered for if they have specific choices in that regard. Moving down to page 2, for reference, I do not ask students to provide their own monologues for auditions. I have my own reasons for doing that, and I can make a whole video about it, but I provide monologues from the show for them to choose for their audition. It's a little less stressful for them. So anywho, this is the page where I put all of their monologue options down for them to choose from. I also kind of have this little reminder about the basic things they should focus on, like vocal volume, diction, facial expressions, and body language. So page 2 is all of their monologue options. Moving down to page 3, oh look, another brightly highlighted reminder of the date that this paperwork is due. And then we have basic information about the student. So here is where they tell me their name, their pronouns, what grade they're in, their school email. See, this is all a part of that. I learned things over the years of directing and creating paperwork show after show. I have to write school email because otherwise kids try to give me their personal email and I don't want their personal email. So you have to be really specific. Another kind of fun story here, I always put their emergency contact information on here in case I ever need to reach out to a parent or guardian. And what I used to do before I shortened this to EC, I used to say emergency contact name, relationship, email, phone number. But I found what happened was if I wrote relationship, I was starting to get answers like single, divorced, and things like that, which isn't information that I need to know. I just want to know, is this your aunt or your dad or any of those things? So anyway, just my biggest tip, I guess, would just be specific. It helps to be specific, because otherwise you never know what you're going to end up with. Moving down halfway on page 3, this section is for audition information. So this is where we get into the part that's going to be really, really valuable to you during the casting process. So this first section, I want them to list any previous roles in other shows that they've been in, and then also tell me about any onstage or just performance-related experiences. So I ask students to tell me about classes or lessons that they've taken, because you'll have these kids who maybe they've never done a show, but they've been taking dance classes since they were 4, or they're actually really talented in tumbling or gymnastics. And this information is all relevant, it's all performance experience, and so I ask them to put that down. And I have found this also helps students have a little bit more confidence in their audition form, because I think sometimes you have these students who have never done a show before and they get to this section and they're like, oh, I don't have anything to put down, and they don't feel like they can feel like they're not good enough, which absolutely isn't the case. So I love giving them a lot of freedom and flexibility here to write down anything that they feel is relevant. So moving on down, please circle your gender casting preference. This is so incredibly important for so many reasons. First and foremost, to honor our students and the lives that they're leading, and then secondarily, sometimes you just need to mix around gender casting a little bit. I don't know about you guys, but I occasionally have an issue where I have a lot of females audition and not a lot of males, and that means I have to start swapping up some character genders with the permission, of course, of the publishing company. So it's just nice to know who is comfortable being cast in various different genders. Below that, we have please circle the size role you are comfortable having. So this is what I was talking about earlier. On why I put the size of the role next to the character names on page 1. So this helps me out for those students who, sometimes I have students who only want a lead role. If they don't get a lead role, they don't want to be in the show for various reasons. And I talk about that quite a bit in that Honest Casting Conversations video, so feel free to jump over onto that if you kind of want to hear more thoughts on that, or comment down below. But anywho, sometimes they're only interested in one size role. Sometimes they'll circle all of them because they're just happy to be in the show if they're chosen. So it's just important to have that information. And sometimes I've had students who circle ensemble and then I see their audition and I'm like, they can definitely handle a supporting role. I want to offer that to them. And so I'll have that conversation with them during casting and say, hey, I know that you only marched down ensemble. Would you consider having a supporting role? And just have an open dialogue with them about that. I also have this section where they can tell me what role they are very interested in. So I am not one of those directors who, whenever students walk in, I want them to tell me what role they're auditioning for, because I think it's the job of the audition panel to look at everybody who auditions and determine the strongest placement for them. But with that being said, I still want their voices to be heard. I still want them to tell me what role sparks their interest the most. So that is why I have this question right here. And then on the flip side, I have the question, is there any role that you are not comfortable with? For whatever reason, they do not want to portray that part. So I have that section for them there as well to tell me anything that they really do not want. I do have this highlighted note right here. Please note that if you limit yourself to accepting only a certain character or size of role, you may end up without a part. Casting will not be revised. We will not have understudies. This note is for those performers who think that they can kind of corner you into giving them the role that they want. So let's say that you are doing a well-known show. Let's say you're doing The Little Mermaid, right? And you have a girl who wants to be Ariel. That's all she wants to be. End of story. So on gender casting, she would say female. Size role comfortable, she would only circle lead. Is there any role that you are very interested in? Ariel. Is there any role that you are not comfortable with? And she lists every single character who is an Ariel, right? And so then I think in her head, it would be like, well, now they have no choice. They have to cast me as Ariel. But obviously as directors, as audition panels, we know that that's not quite how that works. So I just put this little highlighted note in there to remind them of that fact. These questions are to help us make the most informed decisions, not for them to back us into a corner. This next section might be the most important section of the whole form, and that is students' availability. So I just want them to tell me, when are your orthodontist appointments? Do you have a violin lesson every Tuesday at 4 p.m.? Write all of that down for me. because that is how I'm going to be able to make the most effective rehearsal schedule. And there's lots of spots for you to fill in the blanks here in terms of what dates your rehearsals run through. I also personally have a rule that obviously they need to be there for all of the performances and they need to be there for all of the dress rehearsals. But I do let them know, just because you have some conflicts, it doesn't mean that you can't be in the show. That's absolutely not the case, at least for me in my program. So you can edit that to fit what makes the most sense for you. And then down here, I have more information again outlining where the rehearsals take place. I personally used to rehearse in a different place than I performed in, so this was really important for me to list out all of that information. And then I have this little section down here. Is there anything else you would like the audition panel to know? I just find that this gives them the opportunity to share any other information that maybe they didn't get a chance to in the questions above. A lot of the time students just leave this blank. Sometimes they just write "thank you for the opportunity" with a little smiley face, and you know, that's just always nice to read. So I keep that question on there for that reason. All right, page 4. And as a reminder, page 3 and 4 are the ones that students will turn into you. So that's also why I made them page 3 and 4, so that if you're printing this front and back, they can be one piece of paper. So students only have one piece of paper to turn into you, which makes it incredibly simple and a little easier to keep track of. So, oh look again, another highlighted reminder of when it's due. Page 4 is our cast member contract. I'm not gonna go over all of these rules. They essentially say the same thing over and over again, and that is that students will be open and honest about their availability for rehearsals. They understand that if they are not open and honest about that they can be removed from the show. They also agree to be a good person, collaborate with others, respect others, try their best, all of those things. But it just puts it all in writing for them, and then it's nice to have this as a reference point in case any conflicts do come up during the rehearsal process. I can go back and say, hey, you signed this cast contract, and so does their parent or guardian. Below that, I do have this section that I added after a few years of directing, and that is the teacher recommendation section. So I ask that students find 4 current teachers to sign this section, and it says, by signing this document, your teacher agrees that your participation in the show will not negatively impact your academic performance in their class. And I send out a school-wide email to all teachers before this paperwork goes out anyway, just to let them know, hey, you know, there's this section on the audition paperwork. You might have students asking you to sign this. If you think that them being a part of this pretty time-intensive activity is going to hurt their grade, then by all means, don't sign it and tell them why, or reach out to me about your concerns and maybe we can work together to help this student. Because I think for so many kids, their academics might not be top-notch, but being a part of something like the theater production is really, really vital for them. And I try to work through all of those things, but at the end of the day, we are a school, we do have academic policies, and I have to abide by those. So that is why this section exists. And then page 5. So this is an audition checklist. It's just 3 of the same thing, copy and pasted. So I print this off, and then I just cut them up into the smaller portions, and I have them by the audition paperwork as well for students to grab if they want to. This just keeps them nice and organized and reminds them of all of the things they need to do to successfully make it to the audition room and have everything prepared that they need to. So page 5 doesn't go with every single audition packet. I just included it in here because it is something that I do print off and provide for them whenever I put out all of that audition information. If you have any questions about being a theater teacher, about directing a show, feel free to put them in the comments down below. Or if you want to have a more one-on-one conversation, feel free to go to my channel and then go to my About section. I do have my email on there, so you are welcome to send me an email and I would be happy to chat with you and offer any insight or tips that I can possibly provide to this crazy, crazy world of theater education. So thank you so much for watching, and as always, break a leg.